Hi, it's Katie Mackenzie, mortgage broker with TMG The Mortgage Group, and your host of I Love Vancouver Real Estate. Thank you for taking the time to be with us today. We have the pleasure today of talking with David Watts of David Watts Notary Public. David, welcome.
Thank you very much.
David, most people know that a notary assists in areas of real estate conveyancing, wills, powers of attorney, representation agreements, and notarizing of documents or document certifications. But tell us a bit more about you and what we may not know that a notary helps with.
Sure. Well, thanks very much. Well, about myself, I guess, first, I've been a notary for a little over 10 years. I enjoy the work. A lot of the focus of our business is, just like you've mentioned, around real estate transfers, as well as either people buying or selling properties, as well as refinancing. Then we also do wills, power of attorneys, representation agreements, and notarizations. Myself, I guess, I grew up in Vancouver. The office is right downtown, and we help people who are usually close by to the office, but as long as the property is in British Columbia, we can help them.
Well, we are in the office today, so if you hear any noises in the background, the elevator took me to the wrong floor this morning because it is a beautiful building down here. But
Heritage building.
If you do hear noises in the background, that's some of David's team working hard. But we wanted to talk today a little bit more about, what your supporting team can do, your mortgage broker or realtor and notary can do to ensure a smooth real estate transaction from that legal or conveyancing perspective. And, obviously the first thing is working with a professional on both ends. So people that you trust and who are working for you. So we've got a list of a number of things that come up day to day for you, most likely. And we wanted to narrow them down and just speak to 2 or 3 today. So let's start with timeline. How important is timeline and talking to clients about their expectations of how long a real estate transaction will take with you and what documents are required and how that impacts?
Sure. Well, the timelines are important to look at depending on what type of transaction it is. If it's a purchase transaction, usually you don't have as much input into the timeline because you've got a contract that you have to work towards. If it's a refinance, then you can largely set the timing. But I think what's important for clients to know, how long things take and be realistic about that, what some of the costs are associated with different timelines. I think in terms of a purchase, I know that it takes some time to, for the mortgage approval process. And the 2 things there that are important to consider are there's ourselves being approved, so looking at our income and making sure we have our notice of assessments and all the various things that make sure that we qualify. But often then, what we don't consider is that the lender is usually going to need time to assess the property as well as the individual. Mm-hmm. So sometimes I know if clients think that they're pre-qualified, but don't yet have the property in mind, I've seen sometimes the contracts be written up with fairly unrealistic timing. And so what's important, I guess, is just to realize that once you have a property in mind, that you are leaving enough time for the lender to assess the property to give a proper commitment for the mortgage. Mm-hmm. Once you have a commitment, it is going to take the notary's office, probably, if you don't want to pay rush fees to the strata company, it's probably going to be at least a week. And usually 2 weeks is what we would see as common for a minimum time period from subject removal to completion.
And taking into account weekends, holidays.
Yeah, so 5 business days we would call a week, I guess. Where we sort of measure that from is where the strata management companies, how they charge rush fees. Mm-hmm. Often we don't want to pay rush fees, and we know our clients don't want to pay rush fees. So if we have to order strata forms, and if it's going to take longer than 7 days, we're going to pay rush fees. We want to be able to avoid that. Mm-hmm. So by the time, the client signs off on everything and it goes through, the lender's office and the real estate agent's office and gets to us, that can add a couple of days. And so we just want to make sure there's enough time for everything.
And typically the lender won't instruct you until all conditions are satisfied, unless it's something where they know they're just waiting for a final piece of, and either they'll push the button for you in advance of, knowing that document's arriving eventually. But
usually that's the case, is that, sometimes we'll receive instructions with a few outstanding broker conditions. Other times, depending on the lender, we won't receive instructions often until quite close before the client is signing. We know they're coming, and so we are able to order those strata forms in advance, but I guess it's a little bit lender dependent.
So talk to me about closing on a Friday in real estate. How does that cause issue for the clients?
Well, closing on a Friday can be okay, but what it does is it adds variables to the transaction. And where we really want to manage risk and eliminate variables, if we could have closings on a Thursday or earlier in the week, it generally is better in that we have less variables. An example, I guess, would be if we close on a Friday, a couple of things that can be problematic is if there are any delays in completion, whether because the mortgage doesn't fund on time because there's outstanding conditions, or other things like we don't get vendor documents back because they might be signing out of town, or it takes a little bit longer to get insurance confirmation than we first anticipated. There are a number of variables that can push things into the next day. And if it's Thursday and we get pushed into Friday, it's usually not a big deal because possession might be the Friday anyways. But if we are wanting to close on Friday and have possession on Saturday, which isn't a business day, and the completion gets pushed into Monday, then you can have a problem around getting possession. And if somebody's expecting to move in on Saturday, and then we have the closing get pushed from Friday to Monday, that's problematic. So we do Friday closings, and we don't usually have any say in when the closing date is, but our preference is always to see closings earlier in the week.
So something a buyer wouldn't necessarily be thinking about. They're following the lead on dates, and if they match up with the seller, then arbitrarily a date is chosen.
Yes.
And they may not know that this could be problematic or cause that hiccup. Specifically, I think, if you're adding a few days per diem on the mortgage, they might be able to stomach that. But if they've organized movers, cleaners, and they can't get into their new home, that's a big issue.
It's a big issue. Certainly when you start lining up movers and cleaners and other third parties and in your insurance, and you might be planning on staying there that night, and now you've got nowhere to stay. So there are a number of things that are dependent on gaining possession to a place. So we just want to ensure a smooth move and transition. And so certainly in seeing closings a day prior, not so we're going to be into the weekend, that just makes things sort of smoother for everybody involved.
Yeah. Now, I know another one of my top 10 things of what not to do when you're buying real estate is to head out of town. So
yes.
So can you talk from your perspective with signing with clients, if they're going to be out of town, what impact that can have on the transaction?
Sure. We get that question quite often is, we've done a deal and we're not going to be here for closing. Is this a problem? So we can do it, but again, where we're in the business of managing risk for a successful transaction, it's better if you're in town. If there are things that need to happen, and you're here to attend to it, of course, that's just going to be a lot more helpful.
Yeah.
Sometimes things come up that are unanticipated. It might be that, you're on vacation somewhere and you can't find a notary locally to sign. Or it might be that your lender insists on your documents being signed in Canada. It might be that you need to confirm your insurance, and that needs to be done in person. It might be that there are forms that need to be signed in person somewhere through the process, whether insurance or with a subject, or could be one of a number of things. But they're often things that if there's sufficient time and somebody's out of town, we can manage it. But if we start to be tight on time, which in the Vancouver market, a lot of closings are tight on time just to be competitive and accepted against other offers. If we're tight on time and somebody is out of town, it gets to be, more difficult if we need something to happen to allow that to happen.
Well, and if clients don't have a power of attorney in place, you don't have that authority of someone else being able to sign for you, even if they're able to, because there are certain restrictions within even a power of attorney.
Right.
That is already in place and issued. There's some things you cannot sign for.
Yeah, and a power of attorney is a way that we would often deal with the transaction and somebody being out of town. More often when we're acting for a seller than a buyer. And the reason there is that a lot of lenders are shy about accepting power of attorney when signing a mortgage. It's often it's easier on a sale because we don't have as many eyes looking at the power of attorney. We can look at it and we're fine. And usually the lenders are fine too, but it's just a question of having enough time and vetting the document.
Correct. Yeah.
Where we sometimes get into challenges is the power of attorney might be drawn outside of Canada. We had a client recently where the power of attorney was from Iran, and it was nothing wrong with it other than it was in Arabic. And so I couldn't read it. And certainly the lenders had challenges with it. So, that's an example of something where, relying on a document, we just want to make sure that there's enough time to, if there is a problem, anticipate it and resolve it and not have too many things going on at once. There are other ways of dealing with clients signing out of town. We can sign with, there's an affidavit of execution option. We have the power of attorney option. And then preparing documents to sign with a notary or Canadian consulate or embassy in another location. But these are things that, again, if there's enough time, your notary or lawyer can assist you with.
So recommending that you are in town and are available and leave as much time as possible.
It's certainly helpful. We want to provide a stress-free transaction. And so one of the things that helps us to do that is if our clients are in town.
I always recommend people take a day or two off as well to make sure that they've got stress-free, no work on the brain time as well. You're making possibly one of the largest purchases you'll ever make. You need to make the time available.
For right around the move, it's helpful that people are available. And I do understand also that, if people are in the middle of a move and everything's unplugged and in a truck and moving from one place to another, it can be difficult to reach people.
Yeah.
But I think most people have cell phones or iPhones or whatever and are reachable.
So then talk to me about the difference between a notary public and a lawyer.
So in British Columbia, BC notaries and lawyers both practice in the areas of residential real estate conveyancing. Notaries are specifically trained in this area. A lot of lawyers choose this as an area of practice, and they receive training through CLE, continuing legal education, or through their firm, or they are self-trained. BC notaries, generally speaking, when we become licensed, we have specific training that we follow. Basically, our training is the same. Notaries have a little bit more mandatory insurance. Lawyers generally have optional insurance up to the level of properties that they're dealing in. So really what it comes down to is whether you're working with a lawyer or a notary, I think it's more important to be working with somebody who you know, who you like, who you trust. And because at the end of the day, likely the transaction is going to be done and you'll be in your new home. And it's just really, was it a stressful transaction for you? Did you fully understand what was going on? Did you find it was an efficient use of your time? Did you enjoy the process? And so these are things that, we can work towards and try and make sure that our clients are really happy on the way out. And so whether it's a lawyer or a notary, it doesn't make a lot of difference as to who you work with. I have had the comment that people say it's better to use a lawyer because if something goes wrong, notaries can't give legal advice or we can't fix it. And so I guess to that, I would say that, notaries specialize in real estate transactions and in completions. We'll do somewhere between 600 and 700 transactions this year. So we see a lot of transactions and we do solve a lot of problems when there are delays or just things that need some creativity. Now, if we get to a point where there is people digging their heels between the buyer and the seller, and there is actually a legal issue that people are going to litigate, we will recommend, we'll refer our client to a litigation specialist. We feel that our specialization is in closing deals, and if we need litigation, we'll recommend them to someone who specializes in litigation. We've got some good lawyers who we work with, and they take care of us in that regard. So having a lawyer who does both litigation as well as real estate completions, I guess for me, I think that I don't know how you could specialize in both because they're both fairly different practices. Anyway, that's my thought on that.
It's like me saying, okay, why would I deal with a mortgage specialist in a branch who also does bank accounts, Visa cards, lines of credit, as opposed to working with a mortgage broker like myself? It's like, well, we do significantly more transactions, see more clients. Yeah.
You're a specialist in the area that you practice.
Something or one of every kind of possible deal, but yet they're all different over and over and over. But yeah, you specialize so that you can offer a smoother transaction.
Yeah, I think it's always good to work with people who are experts at what they're doing.
Yeah.
And so that's, so whether you're choosing a lawyer or a notary, you just want to choose someone who knows what they're doing and is, has a lot of experience with it.
Yeah. So, David, is there anything else that we should know about you other than, you're the Georgia Strait's Best of Vancouver winner over and over? I'm looking at all these awards on his wall behind him. But is there anything else that we should know about you?
Well, I'm not sure. I think, and thank you for mentioning the Georgia Strait. We've been fortunate there. We've had 8 years in a row now.
Yeah.
Best lawyer or notary to use when you're buying or selling real estate. I guess in things to know about us, we're located downtown Vancouver. We service properties throughout the province. Our clients are usually, close by to downtown, but often we will meet with them either in another notary's office or somewhere else. We really enjoy doing real estate conveyancing. We also can help with the wills and power of attorneys or any other things that are required. Really our focus in our office, we have 3 things that we think about. We think about efficiency, we think about green practice, and we think about customer service. And we're a little on the fanatical side about all of them. So that's what, we want our clients to leave happy and referring us. And that's been something that's worked really well for us over the last 10 years.
Well, I know all my clients that I've referred have been absolutely blown away by your service and have smooth transactions, at least from what they tell me and what I hear on my end. It's been amazing to work with you. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And that's great to hear. We appreciate that.
So, David, how do people get a hold of you if they'd like to connect with you?
Right. Well, a lot of times it's easy to Google us. If you Google David Notary, you'll find us. But our website is davidnotary.com. You can phone us 604-685-7786, or you can also usually an introduction or referral from your realtor or mortgage broker will put us in touch.
Fantastic. So thank you for taking the time to be with us today, and to our listeners as well. We hope you've learned something today. And if you've got any questions that you've thought of as a result of listening, please do reach out to either David or myself. Katie Mackenzie, mortgage professional with TMG The Mortgage Group, and your host of I Love Vancouver Real Estate.
Thank you, Katie.
Bye.
Bye.